Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 22nd May, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. The Israel-Palestine conflict continues to intensify, marked by escalating military actions and a deepening humanitarian crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced Israel's intention to assume complete control of Gaza by the conclusion of its ongoing offensive. Concurrently, reports from Gaza highlight severe shortages of essential supplies, with civilians enduring lengthy waits for food. At least 82 Palestinians, including women and a week-old infant, have died in Israeli airstrikes, with medical sources reporting at least 51 deaths since dawn on one particular day. Despite Israel's claims of allowing 100 aid trucks into Gaza, UN officials report that this aid is not reaching those who need it. 3 days after Israel announced it would ease its blockade, little aid has reached Palestinians, with displaced people relying on charity food kitchens. The Israeli army has issued evacuation warnings for 14 areas in northern Gaza. Israel's global trade in 2024 consisted of $91.50 billion in imports and $61.70 billion in exports. Tensions are escalating between Israel and its international partners, particularly following an incident where Israeli forces fired warning shots at diplomats touring the West Bank city of Jenin, a stronghold of Palestinian armed groups. Israel alleges that the diplomats deviated from an approved route and entered a restricted zone. Several nations, including Canada, the UK, France, and Mexico, have condemned Israel's action. Foreign Policy Chief Kaya Kallas urged Israel to hold those responsible accountable. Tokyo also lodged a protest over the incident. In Washington, D.C., 2 staff members of the Israeli embassy were fatally shot outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. The victims, a young couple about to be engaged, were attacked while leaving in an event. A 30-year-old suspect, Elias Rodriguez, was apprehended with video capturing the arrest. The suspect allegedly shouted, "Free Palestine," after being taken into custody. Political leaders across the spectrum, including Donald Trump, AOC, Republicans, and Democrats, condemned the shooting as an anti-Semitic act. Trump expressed sorrow and called for an end to such killings. Netanyahu stated that the shooting reflected the terrible price of anti-Semitism and wild incitement against Israel, while Gideon Saar accused unnamed European officials of toxic anti-Semitic incitement. Following the killings, Israel announced it would tighten security at its diplomatic missions worldwide. Turning to the United Kingdom, former Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn is set to table a bill for an inquiry into the UK's role in the Israel-Gaza conflict. This follows his letter to the UK Prime Minister, requesting a comprehensive inquiry with legal power to establish the truth about the UK's involvement in the West Asia conflict since October 2023. Back in Israel, the Supreme Court ruled that the government's decision to terminate the head of the Shin Bet's tenure was made through an improper and unlawful process. China is expanding the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPK, after a meeting in Beijing with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi pledged support and security cooperation, urging trust between Pakistan and Afghanistan amid regional tensions. China's foreign ministry accused President Donald Trump of undermining global strategic balance and stability with the Golden Dome program, claiming it risks weaponizing space. China and ASEAN concluded talks aimed at strengthening a free trade deal, warning against U.S. tariffs. China is addressing weaknesses exposed by the U.S. trade war with a new 5-year plan for 2026 to 2030. emphasizing science and industrial modernization. China has been urged by the EU to address trade complaints and offer compromises, or risk Europe aligning with the US. China criticized the EU's proposed small parcel fees, which would increase costs for Chinese e-commerce companies. In Shanghai and Hangzhou, authorities are investigating Shanghai for suspected illegal collection of public deposits. Landslides in Guizhou province have trapped 21 people. The Drum Tower in Fengyang County partially collapsed. China has launched the world's first satellite computing constellation. Turning to Taiwan, Chinese residents in Seoul are reportedly staying quiet due to rising hostility and anti-China narratives. Concerns have been raised about maritime security after a man reportedly entered Taiwan by sea and traveled around the island for over a month. For investors, the options are to stay out of Taiwan completely or stay invested and hope for the best in case of any China-Taiwan conflict. In the United Arab Emirates, a Chinese city known for vegetable farming has agreed to build a smart agriculture center to test farming know-how in the UAE's desert. South Africa faced a tense White House meeting where US President Donald Trump confronted President Cyril Ramaphosa with unsubstantiated claims of a genocide against white farmers. Trump presented a video and printouts falsely alleging widespread persecution. These actions, based on a fringe conspiracy theory regarding race relations, disrupted the planned agenda of discussing trade. Ramaphosa refuted Trump's claims and attempted to correct the record. The meeting included South African figures like golfers Ernie Els and Retief Goosen and businessman Johan Rupert Diop. The U.S. resettlement of white South Africans has been a point of contention. A Baptist ministry states they have a religious duty to help settle them in the U.S., despite controversy over Afrikaners' refugee status. Relations between the two countries are reportedly at their lowest since the end of apartheid. South Africa's finance minister indicated that the country cannot compensate for the over $430 shortfall resulting from the Trump administration's cuts in foreign aid. Tafi Maka imagines an alternate reality where South Africa offers asylum to 48 million African Americans. United Kingdom. The UK government is in the midst of finalising an agreement to cede sovereignty over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. This follows the lifting of a High Court injunction, but a British court has now blocked the transfer after 2 British nationals born on Diego Garcia claimed the islands should remain under UK control. The High Court in London is examining the deal. Net migration to the UK has nearly halved to 431,000, a drop from 860,000. The Conservatives are taking credit for the near 50% fall, attributing it to changes in visa rules implemented by the last Conservative government. The UK government is reportedly considering selling a post-Brexit border check facility in Kent, built in 2021, due to a potential trade deal with the EU that may make the site redundant. The Children's Commissioner and CAIV are lobbying the UK government to introduce a new GCE in Ukrainian for child refugees. Former prisoners and hostages are urging the UK Prime Minister to secure the release of pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai, who has been held in solitary confinement in Hong Kong for 1602 days. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has suggested that an unpopular measure which deprived millions of retirees of an annual winter fuel subsidy will be changed. Germany. Turning to Germany, Chancellor Friedrich Merz does not see any indication that the war in Ukraine will end soon. Defense Minister Boris Pistorius urged further action to cut off Russia's financial lifelines. Global economy. Globally, oil prices have tumbled, potentially leading to a fall in UK petrol prices. The price of Brent crude fell after reports that OPEC and its allies may increase production for July despite weaker global demand for fossil fuels. United States. In the United States, President Trump appears to have backed off, joining a European push for new sanctions on Russia. He seems eager to move on to doing business deals with the country. United States. The U.S. House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans, passed a tax and spending bill aligned with much of President Donald Trump's agenda. This is projected to add $3.80 trillion to the existing $36.20 trillion national debt over the next decade. Experts predict that this tax bill could lead to 830,000 job losses, increased energy bills, and higher pollution levels, while also dismantling key climate legislation enacted by President Joe Biden. The U.S. government's financial stability is under scrutiny after Moody's lost its highest rating amid widening budget deficit concerns in Washington. In legal news, a federal judge found that the U.S. government unquestionably violated a court order by deporting migrants, including some not from South Sudan, to South Sudan without due process. A lawsuit involving 12 states is reviewing the president's use of a 1977 law to support controversial levies when removing US tariffs. The U.S. government maintains that DOGE is a presidential advisory body, not a federal agency, and is exempt from Freedom of Information Act requests, as the Trump White House urges the Supreme Court to shield Musk's DOGE from. Elsewhere, video footage shows us police investigating the scene after 2 Israeli embassy staff members were shot and killed. Harvard is also fighting back against administration cuts. Donald Trump, Gianna Lessard, has stated he might one day run for as president. Iran's top diplomat has stated that Tehran will not hold its uranium enrichment activities, reaffirming the country's firm position in negotiations with the U.S. regarding its nuclear program. China. Turning to China, South Korea's former foreign minister has urged major powers to foster stability in their relationships, cautioning against a retreat into isolationism between the U.S. and China. Recent discussions between us and Chinese envoys were described as candid. While Gulf states seek benefits from both Washington and Beijing, Chinese leaders must provide more substantial support to solidify recent gain. Beijing has vowed to react to a possible Hawaii ban. South Sudan. The U.S. attempt to deport South Asian migrants to South Sudan has highlighted political tensions in the world's youngest country. This followed a U.S. federal judge ruling that the deportations violated a court order requiring due process. Belarus. In Belarus, a human rights group reports that a Belarusian man has died in prison while serving a sentence for insulting the country's authoritarian president. Nauru and Tonga. The metals company, which has received support from both Nauru and Tonga, has confirmed that it will not apply for a mining license through the International Seabed Authority. Qatar. The U.S. officially accepted a luxury jet from Qatar to serve as Trump's Air Force One, raising ethical and security concerns from both Democrats and Republicans. Pakistan faces a complex security landscape after a suicide bombing in Balochistan killed at least 6, including 3 children and 2 soldiers on an army school bus. The attack occurred in a region known for rebel activity, prompting widespread condemnation and mass funerals for the victims. Compounding these challenges, Pakistan expelled an Indian official on May 23rd, alleging espionage further straining relations between the 2 nations. Simultaneously, Pakistan is reinforcing its strategic alliance with China, seeking diplomatic and economic support. In Karachi, authorities are battling a tuberculosis outbreak among elephants at the safari park, administering daily medication hidden in food. The nation's efforts to combat online disinformation through cybercrime laws have drawn criticism, with rights groups claiming the measures stifle free speech and target journalists. Germany marked a significant moment as Friedrich Merz traveled to Lithuania, attending the ceremony for the official establishment of Germany's first permanent overseas military unit since World War II, a strategic move spurred by concerns over Russian aggression. Domestically, German law enforcement apprehended 5 teenagers implicated in a domestic terrorism conspiracy. Justice Minister Stephanie Hubig stated that the group committed arson against buildings for asylum seekers, revealing the issue of right-wing extremism among the country's youth. In a separate case, a network allegedly obtaining visas for wealthy Chinese citizens was shut down, with suspects charging up to $260,790 per case to enable entry and residence in Germany. Furthering international relations, the foreign ministers of Germany and Nigeria pledged to enhance cooperation between their nations, emphasizing the economy, energy, and migration. Turning to Portugal, the nation is urging ESA, the European Energy Regulators Agency, to launch an independent inquiry into the circumstances surrounding a significant power outage. India is currently focused on both internal security and external economic relations. Within the country, a large-scale operation involving over 40,000 security personnel is underway in Basta Chhattisgarh, targeting Maoist rebels. Recent successes include the elimination of Nambala Keshav Rao, the General Secretary of the banned Communist Party of India Maoist. The Indian government has set a goal to quell the Maoist insurgency by the following year. Simultaneously, India is enacting retaliatory tariffs on the U.S., totaling $7.60 billion targeting steel and aluminum products. This action responds to earlier U.S. tariffs imposed on India. Apple and India have been collaborating against China, although President Trump has viewed India as potential leverage in tariff negotiations. President Trump claimed to have ended India-Pakistan hostilities through trade during a meeting with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Turning to Israel, Palestine, the Palestinian Authority has condemned the Israeli government. This condemnation follows an incident where the Israeli army fired upon a delegation in Jenin. It was confirmed that an Indian diplomat was not part of the delegation involved in the incident. Japan is facing scrutiny for its continued investment in LNG despite its climate commitments. The Japan Business Federation announced substantial pay increases for a large segment of the workforce. Japan and the US have reiterated their dedication to market-determined exchange rates. Strengthening international ties, Japan and Paraguay are forming a strategic partnership backed by a new investment agreement. Furthermore, Japan is reviewing its foreign driver's license conversion policies to enhance regulatory oversight. Australia is grappling with catastrophic flooding along its eastern seaboard, leading to 3 confirmed fatalities and a search for 1 individual still missing. Close to 50,000 residents find themselves isolated as relentless rainfall exacerbates river levels and renders roads impassable. A 63-year-old's body was recovered amid the deluge. In the Victorian Supreme Court, the mushroom lunch trial saw the presentation of Facebook messages that shed light on Erin Patterson's strained relationship with her former husband's parents. The messages indicated Patterson's wish to cut off contact and contained disparaging remarks. Russia is facing new tariffs on fertilizer imports from Russia and Belarus, set to begin in July and gradually increase over 3 years. The Kremlin has stated that no further direct talks with Ukraine are scheduled regarding the ongoing conflict. Russia's confirmed war aims include annexing 4 regions of Ukraine in addition to Crimea and forcing Ukraine to become a buffer state, raising concerns about the sincerity of any negotiations. President Vladimir Putin recently visited a nuclear power plant under construction in the Kursk region, his first such visit since Russian forces pushed out Ukrainian forces. Separately, Brazilian federal agents are dismantling a Russian intelligence operation in Brazil, where Russia has been using the country as an assembly point for deep cover operatives, also known as illegals, who establish new identities over many years to operate undetected. The U.S. Defense Department accepted a Boeing 747 from Qatar as a gift, potentially for use as the new Air Force One during the Trump administration. Secretary Pete Hegseth oversaw the acceptance. The Pentagon asserted the acceptance was in accordance with all federal rules and regulations. This offer has generated bipartisan criticism. Questions are being raised about Qatar's motives behind this gift. These questions are amplified by Trump's business dealings during a visit. Mexico witnessed the relocation of hundreds of animals from the Ostok refuge near Culiacan, Sinaloa, prompted by threats from drug gangs. The refuge housed elephants, crocodiles, lions, and tigers. Separately, the personal secretary and a close advisor to Mexico City's Mayor Clara Brugada were killed. Police report that at least 4 individuals in 3 vehicles were involved. On the international stage, Mexico is seeking to maintain neutrality in the U.S.-China tariff disputes, encouraging Beijing to enhance trade relations and cultivate political friendship, despite the United States being its primary trade partner. The United States is currently experiencing a surge of interest in Bitcoin, driven by anticipation of favorable cryptocurrency legislation. A proposed Republican bill is raising concerns about a potential global tax dispute. This bill could lead to retaliatory taxes on foreign businesses operating in the U.S., creating an economic conflict. Simultaneously, a broad coalition is backing the health secretary's efforts to restrict the use of atrazine, a common weed killer. Atrazine has already been banned in Europe due to health and environmental concerns. The International Booker Prize was awarded to Banu Mushtaq's Hot Lamp, translated by Deepa Basti. The novel had previously received little recognition in both Britain and the United States. The Philippines is undergoing a period of significant change, as President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has requested the resignation of his entire cabinet, amid recent mid-term election setbacks, signaling a potential restructuring of his administration. Adding to the country's challenges, tensions are escalating in the South China Sea, with the Philippines accusing China of aggressive actions. This accusation came after the Chinese Coast Guard claimed a Philippine vessel dangerously approached one of their ships, leading to a collision. In related news, TikTok has reported shutting down covert influence networks that used fake accounts to promote certain politicians during the recent Philippine midterm elections, highlighting concerns about digital interference. Malaysia is currently grappling with significant economic and labor issues. Bangladeshi migrant workers are pursuing legal action against Kawaguchi Manufacturing, a supplier to Japanese firms, alleging wage theft for up to 8 months prior to the company's closure. Concurrently, Malaysia aims to elevate its semiconductor sector, shifting from basic assembly to advanced chip design and manufacturing. However, these aspirations are complicated by President Trump's trade policies. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has called on Assad to confront both Trump's tariffs and the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, pushing for enhanced assertiveness and independence among member states. Singapore is seeing adjustments in its cabinet, showcasing Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's collaborative approach. Masagos Zulkifli is stepping down as Minister in charge of Muslim affairs as part of this reshuffle. Simultaneously, Singapore's economic outlook faces uncertainty, with analysts suggesting a possible technical recession stemming from its tariff policies despite a surprisingly robust economic performance in the first quarter. The United States is under scrutiny for allegedly sending migrants to South Sudan, a nation it once backed for independence. A U.S. judge ruled the Trump administration unlawfully deported 8 men convicted of violent crimes to South Sudan. These deportations violated a court order. The Trump administration also deported convicted criminals from Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, Mexico, and Cuba, to South Sudan. France is grappling with cross-channel tragedies, prompting joint efforts with British authorities after a woman and child died attempting the perilous journey to Britain. Simultaneously, French law enforcement dismantled a substantial Telegram pedophile ring, arresting 55 individuals, including figures from various professions such as a priest, a paramedic, and a music teacher. In diplomatic circles, President Macron held talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, centering on the critical topic of international trade. Turning to China, President Xi Jinping conveyed to French President Macron the importance of Sino-French cooperation in safeguarding international trade rules. This dialogue arises amidst the European Union's consideration of imposing fees on low-cost parcels, predominantly originating from China, adding a layer of complexity to the global trade landscape. Yemen is facing a worsening humanitarian crisis as a result of military strikes by the US and Israel against the Houthi rebels. These strikes, coupled with sanctions targeting the Iran-backed militia, are impacting aid delivery. Civilian casualties are being reported by aid agencies operating in the region. Shifting focus to Canada, the government is facing increasing pressure to address rising housing costs. New policies are being debated to cool the market and increase affordability for first-time buyers. The Prime Minister is expected to announce new measures in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, in France, President Macron is grappling with ongoing protests against pension reform. Unions are planning further strikes to disrupt key industries. The reforms aim to raise the retirement age. In the latest from Germany, the government has announced a new package of economic measures to combat inflation. These include tax cuts and subsidies for energy costs. The measures are designed to ease the burden on households. Romania's political landscape sees continued stability as a court confirms the recent presidential election rerun, effectively dismissing the challenge from the hard-right candidate. The pro-European Union victor can now proceed without this legal hurdle. Moving to Vatican City and Rome, the Eternal City provides a unique fitness haven for Vatican residents. The Omega Gym in Rome serves as a popular workout spot for priests, nuns, and monsignors residing in Vatican City, and it was once frequented by the future Pope himself. Brazil is currently facing scrutiny over potential long-term KGB operations initiated during the Cold War. These operations allegedly involved the establishment of new identities for deep-cover operatives using Brazilian birth certificates. The KGB's approach often prioritized long-term strategic positioning over immediate tactical advantages, suggesting a well-orchestrated and sustained deployment of agents within Brazilian society. The European Union is stepping in with emergency funding for Radio Free Europe. This action comes after former President Trump's directives led to the dismantling of its parent company. However, the funding provided falls short of the amount Radio Free Europe says is necessary to sustain its operations effectively. Indonesia is seeing a surge in popularity for 17-year-old Wahyuni, known for her motorcycle stunts on the Wall of Death in North Sumatra. Simultaneously, the Chinese-Indonesian community is pushing for the official recognition of the mass rapes committed during the 1998 riots. They assert this acknowledgement is vital for national reconciliation and healing. Amidst escalating tensions, the United States, through Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, has criticized the United Kingdom, Canada, and France. Huckabee claims these nations are incorrectly assigning blame for the recent violence in Gaza. He firmly stated that Hamas is responsible for the ongoing suffering. Canada is in talks with the United States about joining its Golden Dome missile defense system. Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed the discussions. The U.S. aims to have the system operational by 2029, according to Donald Trump. Algeria officially became a member of the BRICS Bank, NDB, after submitting its accession instrument on May 19. Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, is grappling with a critical water shortage, a consequence of rapid urbanization, poor management practices, and the escalating effects of climate change. This dire situation forces residents to confront the difficult choice between securing food and accessing clean water. China's Premier Li Qiang is set to participate in a joint meeting with representatives from Gulf and Southeast Asian nations. This represents a strategic opportunity for Beijing to rally support and counter the impact of US terror. The European Union is considering measures against Hungary concerning a proposed law that is perceived as a potential clampdown on activists and media, bearing similarities to restrictive Russian legislation. Greece, facing increasingly severe wildfires exacerbated by climate change, is significantly expanding its resources. The country is doubling its drone surveillance capacity and deploying a record number of 18,000 firefighters. The Netherlands is witnessing a resurgence of its synagogues 80 years after the devastation of World War II, during which the Holocaust resulted in the murder of 6 million Jewish people, including many Dutch citizens. Off the coast of Norway, a cargo ship ran aground, remarkably without causing any injuries to the 16 crew members on board. A cabin owner nearby remained asleep during the incident. Sri Lanka finds itself in a delicate position amidst escalating tensions between India and Pakistan, following attacks in Kashmir. Analysts suggest that the country cannot afford to take sides, emphasizing the need to maintain neutrality. Taiwan has appointed Freddie Lim, known as the founder and lead singer of the band Sonic, as its new envoy to Finland. Thailand is moving to implement stricter regulations governing the sale of cannabis. This decision follows a notable increase in incidents involving tourists attempting to smuggle the drug out of the country. Tonga has received funding to support key health and economic development projects, according to a recent update on news from the Pacific region. The United Kingdom is on the verge of signing an agreement that would transfer sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. The agreement also ensures the continued operation of the Diego Garcia base in coordination with the United States. In the United States, the Trump Organization has broken ground on a $1.50 billion luxury resort and golf course in Vietnam, with Eric Trump present at the groundbreaking. Separately, an 80-year-old Vietnam veteran graduated from South Carolina State University to applause. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.